All right, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with father, husband, teacher, coach, athletic director, author, speaker, and probably some other stuff that I'm forgetting, Mr. Ethan Miller.
Welcome, man. It's awesome to be here. It's great.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for being on. Now, we've met each other through athletics and school stuff. I mean, as athletic directors, I think is when we first met.
Yep.
And you teach and coach at Central Springs, which is a neighboring school district to where I teach and coach. And I guess I don't really know nor talk about what got you into the wild world of education to begin with.
Well, I grew up in a town of Humboldt, Iowa, and both my parents were teachers. And that was used to growing up in a building, used to growing up around going to games and activities. My dad was a high school band director, so when he was a high school band director, we played in pep band and Friday night football games and basketball games. That was a part of my growing up. My mom was a high school art teacher, and so I had a lot of experiences there with shows and concerts and things that we had going on in our family. But I knew at a young age I wanted to be a teacher and a coach. I had a mentor, my elementary PE teacher, a guy by the name of Stu Fritz, who was the longtime head baseball coach at Hope College in Holland, Michigan. And I saw him like, this guy's awesome. I mean, he had a ton of energy. He was coaching. I'm like, he just carried himself with such a strong demeanor. I'm like, I was in fourth grade. I'm like, yeah, I want to teach and coach. And so that was the path that sort of opened itself up to me at a very early age. And then after graduation from high school, that didn't change, and continued on that path that got me into education.
That's awesome. Now, it's kind of interesting. So your dad's a band director, your mom's an art teacher. I mean, there's a lot of like fine art stuff. And you're a big athletics guy. Was that something you just kind of were doing everything all the time as a kid? I mean, exposed to all these different things?
So the look I get often is like, dad band director, mom art teacher, and they get this like vision in their head of what those sort of people are. But my dad is a super competitive individual. Rides a Harley, has a handlebar mustache. But he's retired now and plays in a bunch of bands professionally and has CDs out from his brass groups. And then my mom does professional art now since she's retired. But she was tried to pass along that to us. I have as many art skills as humanly possible, as my students will attest, as I try drawing pictures on the board for certain. I'm really good at stick figures, but so I had a wide variety of experiences growing up, from athletics, and then I was also involved in music and played tuba, trombone, trumpet, and drums along with that. So my dad, as a high school band director, would always say, and then he moved to the junior high later on in my life because just the time commitment and wanted to be around the family more, and just the sheer number of events he'd be involved with. So when he's trying to get kids involved with band at the junior high level, all these parents would say, well, my son's going to focus on athletics. And so I got to be a great selling point because my dad could say, well, he was an all-state athlete and an all-state musician, so you can do both.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay. So it was good. A wide variety of experiences that I continue to draw back for that I use today.
That's awesome. And then now, so as a teacher, you teach physical education, health, teach a character and leadership class, and then is that class where you teach the Make It Stick book? Is that a separate class?
So what I do, I teach character and leadership classes for our freshman level and then also our senior level, and then the Make It Stick book is just permeated as far as within the class itself.
Okay.
From different principles of learning, because the class that we teach at the freshman level with personal growth and development, we instituted 6 years ago because we found that we were missing something with our students and their preparedness to live life as a high school student, where their responsibility has to be a lot higher. The potentials are a lot bigger for their outcome and lifestyle design, and where kids were failing were nothing to do with their ability and content, but to on their personal habits. And so we developed this class and started to kind of think outside the box. It's required for our freshmen, and we're seeing some positive impact because of that. And then it's branched off into a senior level class. I teach high school level health class as well, and elementary physical education, along with my duties as high school athletic director, head baseball coach, assistant girls track coach.
Now, you've got a lot going on, and we talked about this when Conway was on the podcast, but for people who don't maybe understand, in a small school setting, if you're an athletic director, it's not like that's your only job and you have a secretary and you're just doing whatever. I mean, like, that's kind of a full-time job on top of one, or but at least one other full-time job, not to include coaching and all that stuff too. So just from like a professional standpoint, how do you balance just those sort of things in the education realm?
So now this is my 8th year as an athletic director, and I feel like I've got the systems and forms and programs and all those different documents you need. It's pretty automated now. But from a time management standpoint, I really pride myself on that. From a time management standpoint, is this like, listen, we have 168 hours a week to do what we need to do, and time is the most constant denominator amongst all people in our competition, or that also that of ourselves. And so it's what we do with that time. It's not how much time you have, but what you do with the time you have. And no one's going to add a 25th hour or a 32nd day in the month for us just because we have a lot going on. So we have to be really great with it. So I plan my day from the moment I wake up to when I go to bed. I map it out in a Google document. From my morning routine to waking up at 4:15 in the morning to work out, what happens within the house, getting the family in the house ready to go, and my wife and I get in the house, keeping it buzzing and keep it moving, to what happens here at school, to how I break it down and schedule it that way. Then what also happens after school, how I slow it down at night, and then before lights go out to get ready for the next day.
Sure.
So I've got to be the best at time in order to have the deepest impact that you want to make. So I'm not going to make that excuse of I'm busy or I've just got too much going on, too much on my plate. I have a full schedule. Let's execute the day. Because in all honesty, people plan their Super Bowl party with more detail than their own lives. You know, and so can we plan every single day that we need to make the most out of it? Because today is the most important day of our life. It's the only day we're living.
Sure.
And so we can't live for tomorrow when all we have is today.
So just like talking a little bit about your routines then. So like your morning routine, do you try to keep it something consistent where it's a very similar thing every day? Like, is that part of the routine, or does it depend day to day what you have going on?
So a lot of it depends upon the day, but for the most part, my morning is 4 o'clock, 4:15 wake up, depending upon if I need to go for a long run or if I need to do strength training. But morning exercise for me is a domino effect. It puts everything else into place. I started that early wake up because as a guy who is a father and as a husband, everybody wants your time at 4:30 in the afternoon. Nobody wants your time at 4:30 in the morning.
Sure.
And so once I implemented that strategy, it just changed. It just made everything. Nobody really liked. I mean, no one likes to wake up early, but I like the benefits of what it does for me, and so it makes me more alert, makes me more energized. It's like taking my energy pill for the day, and then it gets things started. So my morning routine is very, very consistent about the things I do every single morning.
Sure.
And now that allows me to be almost put things on autopilot instead of having to make a ton of decisions every single day. So my AM routine and my shutdown PM routine is just helping me get ready for the next day, and then I can execute in the morning.
Sure.
And so from waking up, clothes are lined out and already regular from the night before, from what my workout stuff is going to be, wear the same stuff to the gym, get done, come home, and then I start everything else that goes with it. So the essentials of my morning routine are workout, a form of meditation, or breathing, then breakfast, and then preparation of my wife, my kids, my school day stuff, and then shower, dress, out the door.
Sure.
And then at night it's the same way. It's clothes out for the next day. That's what I wear at school. What I wear that. So that allows me to make decisions. The ones that I have to make that are the most important, because decision fatigue is very real. And if we're constantly making decisions over and over and over again, what that does is that when then we have to make really big decisions, we're over it.
Sure.
All right. So it allows me to be as productive as possible.
So I'm just curious because I'm fascinated with meditation and like breathing and stuff like that as well. So what types of meditation, breathing types and things do you do?
So there's a couple apps I use. One is called Headspace.
Sure.
That's a lot more guided meditation. Another one is called Calm, which is what I've gravitated more towards. So I'll meditate twice a day. Once in the morning, which is usually non-guided. I use it before, so I either, depending upon the day where I'm at, where my mind is doing, if when I wake up, if it's like I know my mind's already racing in the minute I wake up, I'll breathe and meditate for 5 to 10 minutes before I then go to the gym.
Sure.
Or if it's just a normal day where it's like, hey, it's all good in the neighborhood, I'll do it then afterwards as a transition out of that moment and then into being present with the family. So, and then at night, I use it as a form of like a body scan, a guided meditation at night, body scan, kind of like recalling and reconditioning from what the previous day was. And then that allows me to then slow it down and shut it down. And usually I don't make it to the end of a 10-minute breathing session before I'm asleep.
Sure.
So,
sure.
yeah. And the research is behind meditation is increasing more and more because, one of the statements is like, we could meditate before we need to medicate. And I think we have to just sometimes slow things down because in the treadmill of life, we're expected to jump from one to the next. We'd never do that in a fitness center, like have one treadmill at 10, have the next at 10 and say, okay, you're going to jump to the next one without missing a beat. Right?
Yeah.
And even with our young people too. So like within our school on Mondays, our kids know this. It's Mindful Monday, and so we start every single day with either a 5 to 10 minute guided or non-guided breathing. So there's allows them to get present, allows them to refocus, allows them to say, okay, I can let go of what the past was and focus on the present. And so it becomes very therapeutic. It's great with some of our ADD, ADHD people, those who might suffer from a form of depression and anxiety, is just allow them to get in tune with themselves, to breathe, to focus, and to sometimes let go of those things we can't control and hone in on the things we can.
Sure. So then when you're doing that breathing, either like leading the students or with yourself, I mean, is it just focusing on the consciousness of your breath? You're doing the in through the nose, out through the mouth. I mean, what are you focusing on with the actual breathing?
So there's one we'll do is called a 6-2-8, which is they'll inhale for 6, hold for 2, and then exhale for 8. So it allows them just to get deep, and I'll actually talk them through that, and we'll do probably 5 iterations of that before then we take off and then say, okay, you're on your own now for the next 4 to 5 minutes of just doing that. Navy SEAL training, when the powers of their breath, and what they'll do is a form of 6-2-8 or a 5x5 box breathing, where it's more like you breathe in for 5 and then back out for 5. And Mark Divine, author of Way of the SEAL, talks about how that even saved him on a mission because they ran out of oxygen while they're underneath of a high-value target, underneath of a boat, and both these guys had to save and share an oxygen tank for almost 2 hours. And so what they were doing is that as they were doing this sort of box breathing in their mind while they were holding onto their breath, while one guy took a pull from the oxygen tank, and it goes back and forth. So it allows you to stay calm and to stay present because, in life, how fast things move moment to moment is just the power of oxygenating your brain and yourself to just create that sense of calm. And just young people would be, on an athletic field, take a breath, pre-pitch, pre-shot, pre-play, and then also post to release it and move on to the next one. So so we do a couple different types with the students just to give them exposure. And some can get present really fast. Others, it just depends where they're at mentally, emotionally. That's it might be more of a struggle, but again, it's the act of doing it that makes it the biggest difference. Is just sometimes making the attempt. We don't have to be perfect; we just have to be present.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's great. And then, so back to your own morning routine a little bit. Just because I know you like to make the most use out of your time when you're exercising, doing those things. Are you listening to podcasts, audio books? I mean, what are you multitasking with that, or are you staying just completely focused on the exercise?
So what I'll do with, I train 6 days a week. So 3 days of strength training, 3 days of cardio, with the cardio during the week being like anywhere from 4 to 6 miles, and then try to do something bigger, 8 to 10 on the weekend, if time permits. We can't always make it perfect at the same time, but but if I'm hitting weights, it's usually 5-figure Death Punch radio or something like that on Pandora. Something a little bit more geeked up. But then also when I run, though, I will listen to audiobooks or listen to podcasts, or even sometimes I'm on a treadmill just watching episodes of The Office while I'm running, too. So sometimes not just it doesn't have to always be about trying to do something different, but just being able to get that time in is therapeutic for me too, so that I can have that little bit of me time. But has been very, very beneficial, and something that is going to be I can maintain that to be consistent, because I need to be able to, just like we're all actors on a stage and all just performers, like, so how can we perform it at our absolute best? And if there's something we want for ourselves, like to be able to be energized and juiced up with our kids, in our home and also in the classroom, and to be that positive energy, we've got to be able to continue to give that off. So that's what exercise does for me, and it's part of the morning. It's the best, because at night, too many things start chipping at you. There's too many things that start coming your way. It's like, oh man, I need to do this. Oh man, I gotta do this. And whereas nobody bothers at 4:30 in the morning.
Sure. So you touched on a couple of things that I wanted to get to, and I just had the privilege of sitting in on some of just your off-season baseball work stuff, which was great. And two things that I think or that I saw in practice that you kind of mentioned there is one, sort of focusing on the moment. You gave the analogy just during the baseball workout of the guillotine, which I liked that analogy that you made, is that like this is it. You got one opportunity, and you were talking about just reps with the athletes that make the most out of this individual rep because it's all you've got. So how do you translate some of that to your students, to your athletes? I mean, how do you focus on that one individual moment with them?
Everybody wants to have a great high school career. Everybody wants to have a great life, or a sports team wants to have a great season or a great concert. Well, how do we do that? It's moment by moment, right? Mm-hmm. What's the best way to graduate high school? One class at a time. Much like the best way to eat an elephant, one bite at a time. So what we do is we looked way too big picture as far as things are, and it can be daunting. It can be a lot. I mean, if you really think about it, even from a teacher standpoint of hey, we got 190 days that technically we have to be in the building. That's a lot. Mm-hmm. You might say, oh, no, it's one day at a time. Or I don't have to do 190 days this year. I have to do one day 190 different times. So you start to break it down that way. Is even take a sport like football. Well, the difference in the game is going to be 3 or 4 plays. Well, we don't know when those 3 or 4 plays are going to actually happen. So every single play you do matters. Everything's important. So, there are no do or die, now or nevers. This is it. Situations in life. I mean, everything in your life is important and treated as such. And so. How you break that down is just say, hey, this moment matters, and we're stacking moments upon moments, which then is going to lead to what we want for an outcome. We can't jump an entire staircase all the way up to the top. It's step by step, inch by inch, it's a cinch, yard by yard. It's hard. When you take things little by little, do it a lot, and on repeat, and to be consistent as possible, then we're allowed to then get closer to where we need to be. Because growth doesn't happen for you as a person. Growth does not happen by leaps and bounds. Mm-hmm. It's sometimes shuffle steps being in the right direction. And if we can even grow as a person, not one, we hear the phrase, grow 1% better today, get 1% better today. That's really hard though. I mean, 1% every day, that's really hard. Even if we were to grow 0.3%, if you do that every single day for an entire year, you're gonna be 100% the person that you are today.
Sure.
You do that for 2 years, you're 200% the person. You do it for 3 years, you're 400. You're 4, 800. Year 5, you were 1,600% better than the person you were before, just by making one small decision and action to close that gap from where you are to where you want to be. And so how can we do that? Just make a great decision in the moment.
Sure.
Moment by moment, class by class, play by play, pitch by pitch, possession by possession. That's it. And be able to be as present as possible. That's where, we have, the phrase I like to use is we have, as people, have 1 foot in the past, 1 foot in the future, and we take a gigantic dump on the present moment.
Yeah.
Because we're never truly where our feet are. Anxiety is an obsession with the future. Depression is an obsession with the past. We've got to be obsessed with the future, or we got to be obsessed with this present moment, because that's going to help dictate our future as best possible again.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's perfect. And then, the other thing that you mentioned that I saw just at a little bit of baseball stuff too, and that I've always picked up from you, is just sort of this idea of enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. Sort of all the time, whether you call it, bringing the juice or, whatever.
Yep.
And I've talked to people who have seen you speak at something, and we'll get to some of your public speaking stuff, and then they'll come back to St. Ansgar and be like, Ethan Miller? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, what's he like in real life? And I'm like, however you saw him, that's how he is in real life. He's like I think of Spinal Tap, with the knobs go up to 10, these knobs go up to 11.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you do that for yourself, and how do you bring that into the classroom where it's always at 11?
We have to. There's a concept called the flipping of the switch, and I learned this from a friend of mine, mentor. He's a former Navy SEAL by the name of Sean Haggerty. He was a Navy SEAL for 117 combat missions. He was a sniper. He was a point man. He's been the SEAL Instructor of the Year. And he has this concept of flip the switch. When the switch is on, be on. That's laser sharp focus. But when the switch is off, we're broad. We just kind of sit back. But we're also the electricity is still flowing. Even when the switch is off, the electricity is still there. Right, mm-hmm. The power is not ever completely cut. I mean, there's still some there, and we're just waiting for the switch to go back on again. So for me, when the switch is on, it's on, and then we're not going to flicker. We're going to go, and that's a decision. I've always been wired that way. I mean, you being up here today, my daughter Greta running around the school and doing stuff too. She's got, the energy as well. But I also think it's like the decisions we make as far as what we're going to bring, because we as people listen to ourselves way too much and don't talk to ourselves enough. Right? We are dictated so much by our feelings as far as creating then that action that we need, and your feelings really don't matter. Like, I'm tired. Tired is a state. It is not a condition. Act differently than how you feel. You will feel your way, or you will act your way into feeling way more than you ever feel your way into acting.
Sure.
If you're just waiting for the right moment to feel good, if we only work on days we feel good, we're gonna be waiting a long time.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter about your feelings, it's about our action. It's about what we show. And if there's something I want to see out of my students, if there's something I want to see out of my family, if there's something I want to see out of my athletes, or there's something I want to try to project off into others for to see out of them, I better be doing it myself. So people need a model to see, not a motto to say. They need somebody to like look and say, oh my gosh, that's what energy looks like. That's what, is being consistent. And if we can just be consistent as people day in and day out, that's going to then help us to then create that legacy and to live moment by moment. And that's essentially how I view it. Are there days I feel tired? Yeah. Are there days I don't feel like it? Yeah. Are there days where I'm dragging my feet to go to the gym at 4 o'clock in the morning? Yeah. But I've just learned to talk to myself and say it doesn't really matter. Do it anyway. Right? And if you don't feel like 60%, go to battle with that 60% and see what happens.
Yeah. That's awesome. So then, we've talked a lot about your education stuff, teaching, coaching, those sorts of things. But you do a lot of things beyond that. I mean, sort of extending the same message and those sorts of things. But, one, you're an author. And so really 3 books you have out now. You co-authored the one with Brian Cain. If you don't know Brian Cain, he's sort of like a mental conditioning coach.
Yep.
Which was, I wrote it down just to make sure I got the title right, The Mental Game of Athletic Administration.
Correct.
And then you have your 2 own books that are the It Doesn't Happen by Accident series.
Yep.
So the first one is the 6 Keys to Leading with Intention, and then the second one continues off of that same story, and it's Living a Life with Purpose.
Yep.
So what got you into that?
Let's see. You have to date back. In 2015, I had Brian Cain come up and work with our athletic department and do like a one-day professional develop 4 hours with our coaches, and then did like 2 hours with our athletes just on mental conditioning and mental performance. And then had a chance to spend 2 days with him. And so then we really kind of kicked it off and real well as far as our relationship and that mentorship and friendship built from that. And then he asked me to do a podcast with him on implementing the mental game within as an athletic administrator. And so we did this podcast, and then he's like, hey, I need your help with something. I want to write a book on this. So would you jump in? I'm like, yep. So in the span of 1 month, I wrote 4 to 5 hours a day for 22 straight days to get this thing knocked out. It's pushing close to 300 pages. So him and I just went back and forth. I'd do a section, send to him. He'd look over, do his part, come back to me. I'd move on to the next one. So it was constant communication. And then once that came out, I had so some of the podcasts and like just that book coming out too. Then people can see that this guy's an author, and as an author, if you want to be a speaker, the book is almost like a business card. Mm-hmm. It's a way to get in the door.
Sure.
Now, but you also it's an entirely different deal to speak than it is just to write books, because there's the whole audience engagement. There's a whole like presentation aspect of it that's way different than just writing a book and talking about it. So I love motivation, but I'm more about getting people enthusiastic and energized or juiced up, but also to give them systems and strategies that they can use for their life, and that's going to help them to become that person they're destined to be. And so I went up to Las Vegas for an athletic director event with Brian Cain. He was training for a full Ironman and needed to get an 18-mile training run in. So him and his director of operations were both going to do this full 140.6 miles. I'm like, yeah, I'll go run with you. The first I'd ever ran in my life was 13 at that point in time. And then so we went out and we ran this loop in a Vegas park for 3 straight hours. And I had this speaking engagement with a Northeast Iowa Conference, and we were holding it in New Hampton. And then we started talking about the basics of this book or this presentation. and came out. He's like, oh, you should say this. I'm like, oh, I like this better. We just went back and forth, and then it came out to the 6 keys leading with intention. And he's like, this is awesome. You should write a book on this. Make it a storybook. Make it to where you're just, it's like a fable, almost like with John Gordon's book, Energy Bus, where people can create their own pictures in their own minds as far as what these characters look like, and also everyone who they can encounter. So I got home after that trip to Vegas and got aligned with his editor. She wasn't quite ready to do the project, so I just kind of brainstormed on what it was going to look like and wrote the book in a span of 4 days. I wrote from 9 o'clock at night until 2 o'clock in the morning for 4 straight days. Wrote this 100-page book, sent off to the editor, and then off we went. And it was then building a website, trying to figure out how PayPal works, for people to actually buy stuff, and putting it on Amazon. And I self-published it through my own publishing company, Compete Publishing, and then also went from there. It's now the next steps are forming in my own LLC now, and so it's this whole side thing is start off as this kind of fun little thing is now getting bigger, which is humbling, exciting, and yeah. So that book sold, and we're approaching close to 3,000 copies now on that first book. Then I wrote the next one, The Living Life of Purpose. Went through the same process as far as writing goes, and that book's over 1,500 now with that. So it's been good. It's a way to kind of get into places, and so they see an author. So it's in different businesses and different schools. They're using it as their leadership programming, and then so then now it's people see the book, they see some of the different things I've done through podcasts or just a speaking engagement, and then now the consulting aspect is coming up too. Now it's actually working more with their teams, working with their coaching staff, working with their athletes and what they do within mental performance, and them recognizing that it's not witchcraft or wizardry or it's going to be this secret pill you take that's going to make everything better, but it's a way of developing a system that they can implement that's going to permeate everything they do. And mental performance is not just one more thing we do, it's everything. And so it's how you structure practices, it's how you communicate with people, it's how you develop those that you're in charge of. And so that's what makes it incredibly exciting and incredibly worthwhile.
Sure. So in the It Doesn't Happen by Accident books, like you said, you sort of structure it as a fable, and it's a book. Both books I've read, and I think really applicable to anyone. But the story around which it's structured, it starts at least with a beginning teacher, an early teacher who's a little disillusioned with education or his role in it, and then he finds sort of this mentor figure. And not to give too much away, the book's a great read, but then he's learning these 6 keys throughout that first book. How much of that was taken from real life, just in terms of, I know I love education. I think it's the best job in the world. That's something we've talked about on this podcast before, but I think sometimes we do see those teachers who maybe are a little disillusioned, or they get into it and it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. Yeah. So how much of that did you draw from things that you were seeing in education? Yeah, things I saw as a student myself, growing in high school within specific teachers, and also seeing that within being around schools, in 15 years in education. So there's a lot that I took. There's a lot of examples I got from people at other schools and the things that they've seen. The question I get often asked is right away is okay, who are those people like at your school? I'm like, it's not about there's not, who's this guy? Yeah, they were not created as a result of me trying to get a jab at somebody. No, that wasn't it. It was about, and the feedback that's been interesting about this is that, from different building administrators and different other, teachers who've read this book and who have seen that are like, oh my gosh, this makes total sense. We've seen this year in and year out. But then also, like you had said about it, it's so applicable to everybody, working with a business who they're like, oh my gosh, we have employees that are like this, who they've, been long tenured, and someone comes in and they're like, oh, they just kind of latch on to this veteran person, and they get taken down the wrong path where they entered this profession, whether it be teaching or business or whatever it is, with their own ideas, and then those kind of get sloughed off the side because they just get connected to the wrong person. And you see that happen in everyday life with relationships, getting down the wrong path, and you kind of wonder how they ended up there. But that's where it's a story that it could fit
any business or any school, any company or athletic team, because it's real life, and we've seen that. And so then how can we take then each of these individual keys, which is about action, and to use that in everyday life? So then what I do now is that I take those 6 keys and apply mental performance skills to those keys, that to really hammer home the point as far as like not just a concept of like, say, key number 1, make today count. Well, then I use that whole framework to teach about elite mindset and time management and organization. And then as we move into each key, there's 1 to 2 different skill sets that I can help teach as far as a strategy, because motivation is great, right? It's what gets us started, but commitment is what keeps us going. And if we don't have a system or a strategy, then we start falling to the wayside. And it's much like, as like a strength and conditioning program, right? That you have done so well at is, a guy gets in the gym, they're all fired up to do so, but they don't know what they're doing. This is gonna fall apart.
Sure.
And then you give them the right systems or the right strategies and the right tools, then they can just take off.
So then when you're doing, you kind of talked about the book, or all the books giving you an opportunity to just get in places and get in contact with people, and then you've started doing a lot of these speaking engagements and those sorts of things. Is that what you're doing with a lot of these? Is you're structuring around sort of those 6 keys and things like that, and you're training those specific skills then?
Right. Yeah, and each one's different. I think with one of the teams I work with, they're actually doing a book study on the 6 keys, in which that's what they're doing as far as kind of their off-season development. So what I'll do is go and work with them and deliver instruction on that key and those skill sets, and they'll move on to the next time will be the next key, and just breaking it down that way. But some places, like say when I go to I'm working a mental performance camp in the Iowa City area, and I'm not going to take them through the 6 keys, because this can be more about the routines and the mental performance specific to baseball and softball.
Sure.
And then when I go work a speaking engagement at a basketball camp this summer at Iowa State University, and delivering specifically on adversity, I'm not going to be getting into like any of the keys. So
Sure.
it depends upon what the organization wants. But then also being able to have the flexibility and also content to deliver on any sort of different area. And that's what's been fun to continue to grow, is I'm still learning. I'm no by far means an expert. I'm still a student of the game. But when it comes to it, is that there's a lot of content that I have that I can help somebody shorten up their experience, and living according to my personal mission. That has to do with like the question you asked earlier about how to maintain energy levels and like enthusiasm on a daily basis. Is that I'm driven by my core principles of purpose, accountability, commitment, and toughness, and that my mission is to positively impact and influence the lives of those I serve, and I don't care who that is. And I'm in a position of service as a teacher. I'm serving my students, and I go in to work with a group. I'm there to serve them at the highest level possible, to allow them to be at their absolute best when it matters the most.
Sure. No, I liked you kind of talked about your core principles. And I think that's such an important thing that oftentimes people overlook. And it's one of the first things. So in all my classes I do, it's sort of a self-authoring thing. And it's one of the first things that we talk about is, what are your core principles? And it's one of those things that I try to, tell my students, if you don't know what you stand for, you don't know yourself, how are you going to face all of these other things? And I think that's such an important thing. So I like that you read all those off. So just go through them one more time here. What are your core principles?
Okay, so this is part of like what an individual's, and I'll do this with a lot of my one-on-one coaching clients. We'll do this with our students. It's called the MVP process, and that stands for mission, vision, principles. Mission is think eulogy, right? Think like, what do you want your entire life to be about? Not just about a specific area, not just as like a teacher or like a coach or a husband or a, just what do you want your life to be about? And as I said, that is to positively impact and influence the lives of those I serve. My vision is more resume. Like, what do you want the accomplishments? What are the things you want to check off the box, so to speak, and sort of like, hey, live in a life of alignment with my core principles, to create a life for my family that they deserve, or to leave a lasting impact on the students and people that I consult with, right? But then also the principles is that what are those areas of your life that are going to drive behavior? Okay, now so when it comes down to this is part of what's called the performance pathway. Leadership drives culture. Culture drives behavior. Behavior gets results. and your culture is specifically aligned with what your principles are. And principles drive behavior. And so my principles that drive my behavior are purpose, is that I define that as built for others. Accountability is do what I say I'm going to do. Commitment, be 100% where my feet are. And then toughness, the ability to overcome all adversity. So when it comes down to those decisions that need to be made in life, there's a phrase I use called, I am the type of person that. And so when I'm ever met with something that like, oh gosh, we have this, maybe negative self-talk comes in, or like, I don't feel like it, which I alluded to earlier, but that phrase comes to my head. I'm the type of person that is committed to being where I'm at right here, right now, and to oversell that. Go, right? Or toughness. Oh, I'm going to have to have this conversation with the parent, or have a conversation with the student or something. No. I'm the type of person that is going to embrace adversity as an opportunity to grow and get better. So that allows me to align with, what I want for an end product. Vitor Belfort, who is who's a former MMA champion, UFC, one of the youngest, said this, that a boy acts out of preference, a man acts out of principle. And so when we act out of principle, then we are going to then create behaviors that are going to then be with what we believe in. And with young people is that people experience you through your behaviors. And your behaviors are an exact resemblance of your beliefs. Well, if you're not behaving according to your beliefs, that's where we have that gap. And so to help young people understand that you can be a person of action and to have those behaviors align with your beliefs, and then they know what they're about. It's going to help them to decrease stress. It's going to help them to get themselves, not to get out of bad situations, because, we all know as young people are going to make mistakes, or just even, people in general, but hopefully we'll then not allow them to stay there that long.
So with your purpose being, essentially someone who's built for others, that's something I was trying to convey to other people too, is I don't think you can find any peace in this world if you're not serving other people.
Yeah.
So how do you try to sort of convey that message to the people that you work with? Or I guess, what are the things that maybe you also find so significant about that? Or why is that so important?
When I think that, trying to lift up others, because everybody on this planet is trying to navigate this world as best as they can, or even as best as they know how. And one of the things I use is that there's the concept of the FedEx logo. Mm-hmm. And do you know where the arrow is in the FedEx logo? And I show that image, and someone will say, I've never seen it before. And those listening might say, I've never seen this before. Well, pull up a FedEx logo and look at the space between the E and the X. There's an arrow that sticks out. Now, people are like, oh my gosh, once you see it, you never can unsee it. Mm-hmm. Well, there's arrows inside of all of us that are just waiting to be exposed and seen. Now, how can we then know that we have to be in position of service? Is having the attitude of gratitude, and also in recognizing that you're not better than anything, and that you're not too good to pick up a piece of trash in the hallway that you didn't drop. You're not too good to go help out somebody that might need it. Nothing's ever like below you. The example of the New Zealand All Blacks rugby team, the most successful team that there is. There's a concept called sweep the shed. Mm-hmm. And that, maybe you've heard that before, but the captain of the most prestigious and successful rugby team in history, their job as captain is to sweep the floor after games or practices.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever above anything. I think that ego gets in the way for a lot of people, because they think that, well, I'm in this position that I'm too good for that. No, you're not too good for anything. So that's humility. That's showing that, because there's two types of people: those who are humble and those who are about to be. And yeah. So when you model the behavior you want, and even though sometimes, like, if someone says, hey, you got a minute? Yeah, give them a minute. It's not often a minute, but yeah, give them that attention, and to give them that love and care that they need as a human being. And in our world today, which is so jacked up with some of the way people treat others, is we have a responsibility, I believe, just to show humanity to others. And it's not for us to judge, because Lord knows we're all completely flawed in our own ways. But can we show just general kindness and humility, and just to be that type of person that others would just say, hey man, that person made me feel pretty good. Mm-hmm. Because every human being is just one positive interaction away from changing the trajectory of their life. and you never know the impact of a high five, a pat on the back, a smile, a hey, you doing okay, what that can do to somebody. And we need to do more of that. And so that's what service is about. It's offering yourself up to others and realizing that your life is going to help somebody on a deeper level.
Yeah. Now, you've referenced a lot of different things, like whether it's drawn from that legacy book about the All Blacks, which is great. I think the University of Iowa read it, which is where I think we first saw it. And then we bought a bunch of copies and had our football team read it at St. Ansgar and go through it. What are some things, or either people or books or things that you're like, hey, this really impacted me, because I know you're always consuming that and always trying to get better. What are things that you listen to or read, or you're reading right now that you're like, hey, this has really made a difference? Or
part of my morning routine that is to call was Success Hotline, and Success Hotline phone number is 973-743-4690. And you can hit the 15-second repeat button going back to say it again, but 973-743-4690 is a guy by the name of Dr. Rob Gilbert, who leaves a 3-minute message every single day. He's done over 10,000 messages, started this in January 29th, 1992. And he's it's incredible. I've never met the man face-to-face, but I've had numerous phone calls with him, and he's impacted my life as much as as anybody has. But that's part of the routine. That's really good. He has a podcast now, which all those Success Hotline calls go into then in a pod, which then you can just consume in that way, so it doesn't ever go away. Because a phone call recording is it's like this message will self-destruct in 24 hours. There's that. Also, Jocko Willink's podcast is really good. That's great for like long trips because his pods get long. Tim Ferriss is another one that's really positive. Tony Robbins and some of the stuff that he's done, bigger name guys. But then also there's one Ben Bergeron called Chasing Excellence. He's one of the top CrossFit trainers in the world. He's trained Katrin Davis-daughter. He's trained who's won the CrossFit Games, and his is really good just on lifestyle and design and like leadership, and it's that's a positive. So a lot of podcasts try to take in that way. Books I don't get to read as much as I would like to, but take full advantage of Brian Johnson and his Philosopher's Notes, which is or what he has now is Optimize.me, and what he does is he takes a book and breaks it down into like a 15-minute audio that also has a PDF that comes behind it. And so what that does is allows me to then get trim the fat away from actually reading a book, and I can actually listen to that. And I'll get in the habit of listening to the same book every day for a week. Yeah. And then I feel like I've got it really hammered home, and I'll go find another one. And he's done over 300 some, books plus that you can take in that way. So, there's just a few examples, but then also just paying attention to, I think I learn a lot more from my students and those people I'm around than I hope they learn from me, but I learn a lot from them as well, as far as like the positions that they come from, and just being a person that's very observant and aware of what's taking place around you, so that you can make better connections. That's how we build trust too. So
with all of these different things that you're doing, the authoring, teaching, speaking, sort of different facets of the same, under the same umbrella, what are some of the things that you find most rewarding, or maybe things that have surprised you a little bit about all of this stuff that you're doing?
It was this is something that I thought I wanted to do eventually, is to be able to work with others and to go speak. I saw, obviously Brian Keane, his name has come up earlier. He's he's a mentor. He's trained me in mental performance. He's a dear close friend. I saw some of the stuff he was doing. I'm like, man, that was really cool. It'd be so fun to have somebody just want to help them out, as far as coming in to deliver a message. And it's been something I've worked at, and there's a book called Outliers. It's one of my favorite books, and there they talk about the Beatles and Hamburg, Germany, and how they spent, 10 years or something like that, where they were just playing night in, night out. I think it was like 2 or 3 years, but night in, night out for 8-hour sets on repeat, and that they just developed like the mastery of performing and getting to know each other. And so I feel that to this position I'm at is a result of all the previous 14 years that I've been delivering content in the classroom, building positive relationship with kids, and understanding that I'm not trying to change anything about myself to be like a snake oil charmer or salesman, but it's like I feel like there's a message that can help others and change their lives, and that's what I'm about. And it doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you're from. If you want help and growth and shortening up your learning curve, then that's what we have to do. So because we have a really weird. People are interesting because sometimes they would rather fail alone than succeed with help. It's almost that we give ourselves way too much credit to know everything, and that three types of people. The first person is a dabbler. A dabbler is somebody who like tries something new, they reach adversity, or it kind of becomes boring. They quit, they find something new. Right. The next person is called the achiever. Right. They move up and they just work 14-hour days, 16-hour days, 18-hour days, and then they might grow a little bit, but then it's a lot of hard work. Which hard work is going to be a thing we have to do anyway, but sometimes unnecessary. And the last one's called the master. What the master has figured out is that when they reach a point where they need to, they've kind of got a plateau, or they've reached adversity, they find a mentor. They find someone to help them. And then that allows them to grow and continue to move up. But then when they get to another part of adversity, they find a mentor. And so I want to try to help mentor and guide others to a life of fulfillment and excellence. And that's what's been really exciting about this is it's been a IV drip, so to speak, where it's been like little by little here and there. It's not quite a fire hose, but it has. I mean, the faucet speed's turning up a little bit, and that's what's been so enjoyable. Is a chance to take the message, and it motivates me daily to be my best for others. And I tell any group I work with is that I'm going to give you everything I have because you deserve that. And again, that goes back to that position of service, and to give them everything that I got because all we have is today. And if I were to die tomorrow, or heck, even hopefully not driving home after this podcast recording, but that people would say that I was consistent day in and day out with what I living according to my mission. And that to me is success. You know, we have a definition of success is, much people want that, but they don't know what that means to them. And to me is living my life in alignment with my principles. That's success. If I can do that, it's not about wins and losses. It's not about awards. It's not about book sales. It's about making an impact based upon the life that I want to live, and also giving that back to others.
Yeah. So, we've talked about education, the different media stuff. Now, kind of the last, sort of, certainly not the only other remaining facet of your life, but I want to talk a little bit about just family life and that sort of thing. I had a chance today with, you're doing baseball stuff, to watch a little baseball, but also to play with your 5-year-old daughter, Greta.
Yeah.
And we had a good time. But, I enjoyed, talking to young people because I think, first of all, they see the world as people probably should see the world.
It's beautiful, yeah.
And just, that's something I know about you is that, your family kind of, it comes before everything else. But it was interesting even just talking to Greta because kids will just, talk to you and then tell you exactly what's in their mind. And that was one of the things I forget what it was. We were building a castle or something and she said something to you and then she's like, he understands. And I was like, yeah, that's good. And then she said, parents are good listeners. And I'm like, well, that's awesome. Not all parents, but I'm glad that you have that perception that parents are good listeners. So, that was awesome for me. It says a lot about the job you and your wife are doing. That was sort of one of those beautiful little moments. What are the things that you try to focus on with your family life and balancing it with all this other stuff?
Is, to be, when I'm home, be home, right? To, with, even from some of the systems I had was like when I get home and after we usually give ourselves until 5 o'clock or so just to close up any sort of loose ends from the day. But once that happens, we're going to put our phones away. We're going to be give our girls the attention they deserve. We're going to take them places. We're going to go out to eat. We're going to make them feel special and feel loved. And there's a book I read when we found out when Becky was pregnant with Greta, and that's what we found out was a girl. I was gifted a book called The Difference a Daddy Makes, and it had to do with how a girl gets her perception of love based upon the father, not the mother, is how seeing what that love and what romance is. And one thing that my wife and I do is that we put our kids second, because the relationship of us is the one we feel matters most, because if we don't have a strong relationship, and that's something that's going to be our kids are going to notice that, and now again, like relationships, change through the course of time and, just things happen. But our kids know that my wife and I are on a united front together. And as a part of like our plan is that we have a date night every 2 weeks and we do a 90-day getaway where every 90 days we go take a trip somewhere, just her and I. And sometimes the kids might come with, other times it's just us. But then also taking our kids and exposing them to different things from, music to, play lands and hotels and swimming pools. And, but, I love being a father of two girls, with Greta being 5, Margot being 2. I love being the father of 2 girls. I mean, it's special. I get asked like, oh, don't you want to try for another boy? I'm like, no, I mean, I'm set. I don't need to have a boy to feel like the Miller name can continue to pass on. But, yeah, it's an honor. It's the most, being a husband and father, the most important jobs that I have. And if you're going to call it a job, it's calling, so to speak. Is it's a blast to see the world through their eyes and to see those experiences that they have and the type of people they're becoming. And in all reality, my wife and I are just renting our girls for the next 18 years, and for 18 years, and we ship them off and hope that it sticks. And that, every day is an opportunity to show them, love, to teach them lessons. And our parenting philosophy is work the cut, and when it comes down to working the cut, is think of it like a boxing match. When if there's something you want to hammer home, you keep hammering it. And if once the cut is exposed, you keep working the cut. And how hard it is sometimes as parenting is, like to teach those lessons. And, we'd rather do the hardcore parenting now than have to try to do pickup later. And, we're so proud of our girls and who they are, and it's going to be interesting to see what they become later on in life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Won't have a lot else, man. We're kind of coming up, close to that hour mark, and went through a lot of different things. Anything else that you've got?
I think for those that are listening to this and to seeing the journey that you've taken on, I'm proud of you and what you've started to build with your media company and the content you're putting out. And for anybody else that's out there is trying to grasping the concepts that I talked about today. You can send me an email, ethan@ethan-miller.com. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm on Instagram as well. And anything that I can do to help you in your journey and in your path, because that's why I'm here. And I'm going to learn a lot from you in the process as well that maybe I can give to somebody else. But, the path to that we're on is something that we have to be intentional every single day, which when I wrote that book, It Doesn't Happen by Accident series, it happens by intention, and that we've got to be intentional with the life we live. And life is beautiful and ugly all at the same time. But when we embrace it and know that, hey, today matters. Today is the most important day of your life. It's the only day we're living. Go all in on today. Go all in on yourself, and realize that you can become that person that you so want. Because in life, you get what you settle for. And we don't want to be settling for anything. We want to work towards the things that we want with a vision of that type of life we want to create. And one day, one moment, one interaction at a time, because you deserve it. And I'm excited for those of you guys listening to take in this content and hope that it helps you out. And if there's anything I can do to help you out, I'd be honored to do so.
Well, I appreciate it, man. And just for everybody listening again, just so it's ethan-miller.com, and then your links to all your social media stuff is on there.
Yep.
The books are available on there. I mean, all that. So I just, suggest people go there. You can find everything, even your social media. Multiple times a day posting motivational stuff. Some of the things you referenced today. I think recently I saw the FedEx thing and the 1%, a day, that sort of thing. So, that's a great thing to go on there and just see what you're up to and get sort of those little daily shots of motivation.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, man, I appreciate it. This has been a pleasure hanging out with Greta and hanging out with you and seeing practice and the whole deal, man. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Luke.